At noon, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my son, a single photo of my 1967 Mustang followed by one word in bold letters: sold. By dusk, I walked into the garage and froze. The bay that had once echoed with her engine sat empty, the silence cutting deeper than any blade. But what my son didn't realize was that the Mustang wasn't the only secret I kept in there. Just one step away, under a tarp he never bothered to lift, something else was waiting. And when the transporter backed in the very next morning, he was about to discover exactly what I'd parked in the garage next. If you enjoy stories where age, patience, and quiet wisdom turn into unexpected payback, then take a moment to subscribe. And while you're here, tell me where you're listening from. I'll pour the coffee, and we'll keep going. I've always believed a man's garage tells the real story of his life. Not the house, not the furniture, not even the bank account. The garage. That's where sweat and long nights live. That's where dreams sit quietly on four wheels, waiting for the right moment to roar. Mine was no different. For 50 years, I worked my bones down to nothing, just to keep a roof over my family, food on the table, and a little corner of life carved out for myself. That corner was my garage. Inside, under soft yellow lights, sat my pride. Cherry red, chrome trim that gleamed like fire in the sun. Every scratch I'd buffed out. Every bolt I'd tightened myself. She wasn't just a car. She was the memory of a younger man who had nothing but grit, grease on his hands, and a dream that one day he'd drive something worthy of all that fight. Most mornings, I wasn't quick enough to work on her like before. My back stiffened when I bent too long. My fingers sometimes dropped the wrench before I meant to. But I still shuffled down to the garage, coffee in hand, and sat in an old folding chair just to look at her. I'd run my hand along the hood, whispering as though she could hear me. "We made it, didn't we, girl?" I remember the first time I laid eyes on her. It was 1975. I was younger, thinner, working odd welding jobs, and living mostly on stubborn pride. She sat on the corner of a dealer's lot, dust covering her curves, forgotten as a trade-in. I couldn't afford her, not really, but I worked double shifts for 8 long months. I ate beans from a can. I patched holes in my boots with tape. When I finally slapped the cash on that salesman's desk, he laughed. "You're buying this old thing?" he said. I didn't bother answering. I just slid behind the wheel and felt, for the first time in my life, that the world owed me nothing, and I owed it nothing back. That Mustang carried me through every season of my life, through my wife's first pregnancy, when the back seat held a box of diapers and baby bottles, through funerals when I drove slow, my hands steady on the wheel, through long commutes when money was tight, and I thought we'd lose the house. She never broke down on me, not once. And when my boy was small, 8 or 9, he'd sit beside me, grinning as the engine roared. "One day, Dad, this'll be mine," he'd say. And I'd laugh, thinking he meant it like a boy does, with admiration, not calculation. Now, in retirement, life had slowed. Up at 6, coffee black, a walk around the block if my knees behaved, then into the garage. Neighbors sometimes stopped to chat, their eyes wide at the Mustang's shine. They'd shake their heads when I told them she still ran smoother than most cars half her age. I'd just smile. Proud. Quiet. Because what no one knew, what even my son never bothered to ask, was that the second bay of the garage wasn't clutter at all. People thought it was just boxes stacked high, old tools, forgotten junk, but hidden under that tarp, behind the dust, sat something else. Something I had guarded for decades. Something even more valuable than the Mustang. Life felt calm at that stage. My wife had been gone a few years, and the nights were sharp with loneliness, but my routine gave me comfort. Simple meals, bills paid on time, a newspaper folded neatly on the table every morning. But a father never stops worrying. And my son, well, he was restless, always chasing money, always rushing. He wasn't cruel, not exactly. But he'd grown impatient with the steady, quiet way I lived. "Dad, you could sell the car and make a fortune," he'd say. I'd just shake my head and change the subject. I thought he understood. I thought, deep down, he respected what that car meant. I was wrong. Because one quiet Tuesday afternoon, as I sipped my coffee and breathed in the smell of old leather, I had no idea the storm that was about to hit. My peace, my years of work, my son's loyalty, all of it, was about to be tested. But that calm was about to break. It began with a phone call. My son's voice on the other end was casual, too casual. "Dad, you home?" "Where else would I be?" I chuckled. Coffee's on, Mustang's polished, world's still turning. But then came silence, the kind that stretches out and makes your stomach tighten. Finally, he said, "Don't be mad. I did something. Something for us. For the family." Before I could ask, I heard the rumble outside. I stepped to the window and froze. A flatbed tow truck was backing into my driveway. And there, my Mustang, already chained, already strapped, her wheels turning slowly, helplessly. I stumbled out the door. "What the hell is this?" My son stood there, arms crossed, eyes fixed anywhere but mine. "Relax, Dad. You weren't using it. I found a buyer. Got a good price, too." My chest went cold. You sold my car? Without even asking me?" He sighed like I was a child. "Come on, it's just a car. We need the money. Do you want it rotting in here while bills pile up?" Those words cut deeper than a knife. Just a car. That Mustang had been my companion through decades of sacrifice. My one constant. My son, the boy who once sat in her passenger seat, grinning ear to ear, had reduced her to a transaction. "Unhook it!" I barked at the tow driver. He hesitated, looking at my son. "Dad, stop embarrassing yourself," my son snapped. "The deal's done. Papers signed. Money wired. You should be thanking me." My throat locked. I could barely breathe. I stood there, watching as the Mustang rolled down the driveway, her taillights fading like a coffin lowered into the ground. Inside, my son poured himself a drink, sat at my kitchen table like he owned it. "You'll see," he said. "This money will make things easier. We can upgrade your house, maybe even get someone to help you around here." I stared at him. "Do you think I built this life for upgrades? Do you think I worked 50 years so you could sell my memories?" He shrugged. "It's the future, Dad. Sentiment doesn't pay the bills." I wanted to slam my fist on the table. I wanted to shout until my voice broke. Instead, I lowered myself into a chair, staring at him, the boy who once begged me to rev the engine louder. The boy who once said, "One day, this'll be mine." That boy was gone. Halfway through his smug speech, he slipped. "Don't worry," he said. "I got more than enough. The buyer doesn't even know about the second garage. Could have doubled the deal if I'd opened that." My heart stopped. The second garage. The one he never cared to look inside. He didn't know. Not yet. I kept my face blank. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from something sharper. A spark. A plan. "Enjoy your money," I said quietly. "But don't think this makes you right." He smirked, raising his glass. "One day, Dad, you'll thank me." But deep inside, I knew the truth. I wouldn't thank him. I wouldn't forgive him. And I wouldn't forgive him. And I wouldn't forgive him. And I wouldn't stay quiet. That was the moment I decided. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the tick of the clock growing louder with every hour. The space where my Mustang had always been, the space I could picture even in the dark, was now nothing but emptiness. I could almost feel the cold draft from the garage creeping under the door, whispering to me that she was gone. But it wasn't just the car. It was trust. It was respect. And it had been stripped away by my own son. The next morning I made my coffee, but it tasted bitter. I walked to the garage out of habit, opened the door, and froze. The bay stood hollow. Dust had already begun to settle where she'd rested for decades. My chair was still there. My tools were still lined neatly on the bench. But the air felt different. Wrong. Like a church stripped of its altar. Neighbors noticed. Old Bill from across the street ambled over when he saw me staring. "Where's the beauty?" he asked, squinting into the empty bay. "Gone," I managed. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" "My son sold her." Bill's eyes widened. He shook his head, slow and heavy, like the weight of it pressed on him too. "After all these years? Without your say?" I nodded. He didn't speak again, just patted my shoulder and walked back across the street. That silence hurt worse than words. It was pity, quiet pity, and it burned. The week that followed, I drifted like a ghost. I cooked meals I didn't eat. I opened the paper and stared through the words. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed louder, mocking me. My son called twice, bragging about how he'd used the money. Investments, plans for the future. I listened in silence. My jaw clenched. When he hung up, memories returned, sharp as glass. The winter of '92. The furnace broke in the middle of a blizzard. My boy was 12, coughing under blankets. I spent the night in that garage, tearing apart an old heater to rig heat back into the house. My fingers bled. My lungs burned. But by dawn, the house was warm again. Or the summer he wrecked his bike. He was 17. I stayed in the hospital waiting room for 2 nights straight, watching over him, whispering promises that nothing bad would touch him while I still drew breath. All those sacrifices. And now, he had traded away my sacrifices for cash. The loneliness deepened. I stopped answering calls from friends. I avoided the garage altogether, until one evening, after another restless day, I forced myself to open the second bay. The place he had never bothered to peek into. I pulled the tarp back slowly, as though unveiling a secret I had almost forgotten myself. And there she was, a 1955 Porsche 356 Speedster, silver paint gleaming even under the dust, every curve restored by my own hands, piece by piece, over 20 long years. Hardly anyone knew about her, not even my son. I sat in the driver's seat, my hand firm on the wheel, and something swelled in my chest. Not just pride, something sharper. If my son believed the Mustang was all I had, he was about to learn how wrong he was. He had stolen my past, but I still held my future. That night, with the house wrapped in silence and moonlight spilling across the garage floor, I whispered to myself, I've stayed silent long enough. And in that moment, I began to think, very carefully. When you've lived long enough, you learn that patience is sharper than any blade. My son thought he had cut me deep when he sold the Mustang, but he had no idea I'd been sharpening something much quieter, much stronger for decades. That silver Porsche under the tarp, it wasn't just a car. It was leverage. It was proof. It was a story waiting for the right moment to be told. The first thing I did was nothing. Silence is powerful. He expected me to fight, to beg for the Mustang back, to rage like a man cornered. Instead, I gave him calm. I let him brag about his smart investments, about his plans for the future. I even nodded as if I agreed, but inside I was weaving threads he couldn't see. I began with paperwork. Years earlier, after my wife passed, I had quietly rewritten my will. Certain things were moved into a trust, things my son didn't know how to read between the lines. On paper, the Porsche looked like nothing more than tools and assorted storage. To him, it was clutter. To me, it was a crown jewel hiding in plain sight. Next came phone calls. Bill from across the street still had collector friends. And Marty, he had once worked in appraisals. Together, they helped me confirm what I already knew. The Speedster was worth more than the Mustang. Far more. Especially restored, and especially because no one had known it was there. That knowledge lit a fire in me. This wasn't about money. It was about respect, and I intended to show my son just how little he understood me. One afternoon, I called him. Come by this weekend, I said. We'll talk about the future. He sounded smug. Finally seeing sense, Dad. Something like that, I replied. In the days leading up to it, I polished the Porsche until she gleamed like liquid moonlight. I folded the tarp neatly in the corner, where his eyes couldn't miss it. I even parked her outside for a few minutes, just long enough for the neighbors to see, just long enough for whispers to spread. By the time my son pulled up on Saturday, people already suspected I'd been hiding something. He walked into the garage, and his jaw nearly hit the floor. "What the hell is this?" he stammered. I leaned against the hood. "This? Just something I've been tinkering with." "Dad, this is a fortune." He circled the car, hands shaking with greed. "Why didn't you tell me?" I shrugged. "Not everything is yours to know." He rubbed his palms together. His eyes gleamed. "We can sell this. Between this and the Mustang, we'd be set." I cut him off, my voice steady. "You sold the Mustang without asking. That was your mistake. This one, You won't touch. Not now. Not ever. His grin faltered. Don't be stubborn. You can't drive it much anymore. What's the point of keeping it locked away? I looked him dead in the eye. Respect, son. That's the point. Something you don't seem to understand. He laughed bitterly. Respect doesn't pay bills. But betrayal, I said softly, leaning closer, costs more than you can imagine. He didn't understand then, but he would. Over the next few weeks, I laid the groundwork. I arranged for the Porsche to be displayed at a private auction, not to sell, but to showcase, to let the right people see it, to let word spread, and most importantly, to let my son realize just how far out of his depth he was. I invited neighbors, friends, even a few of his business contacts. When the day came, I stood beside the Porsche, calm as ever, while collectors gasped. My son tried to linger by my side, but I deflected the spotlight every time. I restored her myself over 20 years, I told them. Kept her safe, kept her hidden. Some things you don't rush. I saw his face, saw the humiliation spread across it. He wanted to be the man of the hour. Instead, he was an afterthought, and that was only the beginning. Later that night, when he cornered me, his voice was sharp. You embarrassed me today. You could have let me handle the offers. I smiled. Funny. That's what you said about the Mustang. And look how that turned out. His fists clenched, but I stayed calm. I wanted him to stew, to sit in that silence and feel small, because the truth was simple. My son thought the Mustang was the end of the story. But this wasn't just my son sold my classic car. No. This was my son sold my classic car. Without asking. He didn't know what I'd parked in the garage next, and the weight of those words was about to crash down on him. Everything was ready. All I needed was the right moment. The day I chose was nothing special. No birthdays, no holidays, no warnings. And that was exactly the point. I invited my son over for lunch. Nothing more. Come by at 1, I said. We'll talk about the house. He arrived sharp, slick shoes, cologne too strong, that grin plastered on his face. The grin of a man who thought he was winning. He stepped into the kitchen and immediately glanced toward the garage, like a thief checking if the treasure was still there. He wanted the Porsche. Dad, he started, not even bothering with hello. Are you serious? You showed that car at a collector's event? Do you know how small you made me look? I poured him coffee, my hand steady, my voice steady. Sit down, I said. Bill's coming over, Marty too. And so is the buyer of the Mustang. His smile cracked. What buyer? You'll see, I told him. When the men arrived, the air in the room shifted. Neighbors gathered in the doorway. Word had spread. Everyone wanted to see. The buyer walked in, tall and polished. A man used to money. He carried a folder and looked straight at me. I want to make this official, he said, laying the papers on the table. My son's eyes lit up. He thought it was his victory. But then Marty spoke. His voice calm. Firm. Before anything's signed, we need to confirm something. Did the seller, he glanced at my son, have the legal authority to sell that Mustang? My son puffed up. Of course I did. I signed the papers. The money's been wired. What's the problem? Bill reached into his jacket and handed me an envelope. I unfolded it slowly, deliberately, letting the silence stretch. This, I said, is the trust declaration, signed and notarized years ago. It states that all classic vehicles fall under restricted assets. They can't be sold without trustee consent. Trustees are myself and Bill Price. Gasps, murmurs. All eyes turned to my son. You didn't have that consent, I said. My voice quiet, but sharp as a blade. You sold something you had no right to sell. The buyer's jaw tightened. He looked at my son with narrowed eyes. If that's true, then the title you gave me is worthless, which means I want my money back. My son's face drained of color. Wait, no, this is just paperwork. Marty cut him off. No, this is the law, and depending on how you presented yourself, it could even be fraud. The buyer leaned closer. Either I get my refund, or I take this to court. Your choice. The room buzzed. Neighbors whispered. One man muttered, I always thought he was shady. My son stammered. Dad, you can't do this to me. I was only trying to help. I looked him dead in the eye. Help, you sold my memories, my sacrifices, without even asking. That's not help. That's betrayal. His hands shook. He looked around, but no one came to his defense. Not his neighbors, not his so-called friends. And then the final blow. I slid another envelope across the table. My will. Updated. Sealed. I've made sure the things that matter will go to people who respect them. Not squander them. Not sell them. Respect them. He didn't touch the envelope. He couldn't. The buyer snapped his folder shut and stood. I'll expect the refund. With that, he left. The crowd followed, their whispers trailing behind them. And my son? He just sat there, small under the kitchen lights, stripped of the power he thought he held. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam my fists. I didn't need to. The truth, the law, and his own greed had done the work for me. Later, when the house was quiet again, I walked into the garage. The silver Porsche caught the late afternoon sun, her paint glowing like liquid fire. I ran my hand along the hood, slow and steady. The Mustang would return. I knew that. But even before she did, I had something back that mattered more than any car. Dignity. And as I stood there in the silence, with the smell of oil and leather thick in the air, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Freedom. And in that silence, I finally felt free. There's a quiet that comes after a storm. Not the uneasy silence before thunder, but the deep, steady calm that tells you it's over. That's what I felt when the Mustang came home. That's what I felt when my son walked away that day. Smaller, humbled, changed. People sometimes ask me if I regret it. If I regret making my son face that humiliation. But here's the truth. I didn't humiliate him. His own choices did. Selling my Mustang without asking wasn't about a car. It was about respect. It was about trust. And when you break those things, the consequences will find you, one way or another. The title of this story was right all along. My son sold my classic car without asking. He didn't know what I'd parked in the garage next. That silver Porsche wasn't just a secret. It was a reminder that patience has power, that dignity has weight, and that sometimes silence can roar louder than an engine ever could. I didn't seek revenge in anger. I sought balance. My son needed to learn that shortcuts collapse under their own weight, that greed burns itself out, and that even an old man with aching bones still has wisdom, still has strength, and still knows how to stand tall when it matters most. When the Mustang was returned, I polished her hood again, ran my hand along the metal, and whispered the same words I always had. We made it, didn't we, girl? My son and I, we don't speak much now. Maybe one day we will. Maybe one day he'll understand what that day truly meant. But until then, I carry one lesson clear in my heart. Respect is worth more than money. Patience is stronger than pride, and quiet dignity will always outlast betrayal. Would you have handled it the same way I did? I'd love to hear your thoughts below. And if you enjoy stories where quiet wisdom finds its voice, don't forget to subscribe for more.